have to record this. It's our family chronicles.
Clark Family Homeschool Chronicles.
Hello. Welcome to episode 5 of the Clark Family Homeschool Chronicles entitled Family Court. One day, my oldest daughter, Autumn, came up to me and said her little sister was not helping her with the chores. And instead, her little sister was choosing to play and leave all the work to her and her other sisters. Years ago, these types of back and forth and arguing would annoy me to no end. When you are the teacher at home for your children, not only do you have to prepare the lesson plans, you have to sit down with your kids and ensure their work is complete, help them in areas where they're struggling academically. And, you also have to tend to the home, the laundry, the meal preparation, managing the budget, all those things. And of course, my least favorite, but the most important, is discipline and character building. Any and all educators know it is difficult to learn and have fun in the process and teach your children if you're dealing with poor behavior and disciplinary issues throughout the day. It's no different for families who choose to educate their children at home. So children are going to be children no matter what academic setting they're placed in, whether you put your kids on the bus, if they go to private school, or if you choose to educate them at home. Children are going to do what children do. That particular day in the living room, something snapped in me. As I watched my oldest daughter and her younger sister go at it, something just snapped in my brain. You have to understand, when the learning is halted, because I have to deal with arguing and fighting among siblings, as a homeschool mom, I don't have the option to quit. I don't have the option to retreat. Oftentimes, because my husband works full time, I don't have backup during the day. It's one of me and 5 of them. Well, now I have 4 girls at home. One arrow has launched, so I've got 4 little girls at home. When our learning is halted, it sets us back. When I'm spending more time breaking up arguments and fighting, it takes precious time away from learning, from crafting, and having the family fun that is always my focus. I can't tell you how many times I had a whole lesson plan scheduled for the day. I couldn't get through a lesson because I had to constantly stop and address kicking and biting, invasion of privacy, disobedience, temper tantrums, laziness, all of the above. And then my husband walks through the door. After a full day of work, I'm looking at my husband walking through the door. He's smiling and I'm looking at him like, what are you doing home? And I'm shocked because we spent a whole day addressing petty disputes and disobedience. No learning took place. And in those moments, I feel completely defeated. I'm not even going to talk about not being able to put food on the table for dinner. That particular day in the living room, I snapped because I foresaw that day it was not going well and it was headed in that train wreck direction. And if we kept on with the bad attitudes, kept on with the fighting and the whining, it was just going in that direction and I couldn't take it. We had a problem. And by the grace of God, a creative solution popped up in my brain, and all I could think was, take them kids to court. In the Clark Family Homeschool, we handle disputes, disagreements, laziness, deceit, lots of D words I'm noticing, and all manners of behavior issues and violations in our family court system. It's so much fun. It is our way to acknowledge clear violations against family rules in our home, the standards hubby and I have put in place, and what we base how we teach and train our children in righteousness, and how we address 9 times out of 10 sin issues. We base all that in a creative and lighthearted way of teaching and training our children, because we all know most of what our children get into, especially when they're 10 years old and under, is most likely the result of just not being taught. Most of it is not really a big deal. They're experimenting, they're testing boundaries, they're just seeing what they can get away with, and they're exploring. So when they're 10 and under, it's mostly just small things. And those small things are opportunities for us to teach, to train in righteousness. The family court system that we've built gives us as parents that on the spot, real life training and teaching moments. We get to take those opportunities when they're acting up and showing their flesh. It used to be showing their behinds, but we call it showing their flesh. We get to take those opportunities and use it to turn it around and teach them, look at your behind, look at your flesh, look what you're doing. And we get to train them. The same time it takes to fuss at our children and remind them of how they're goofing up, missing the mark, is the same amount of time it takes to help them organize what is actually happening, how their actions are hurting them and others, and what the consequences of their actions will be if they keep it up. The difference is we get to build fun family memories, and we get to learn together as a family in the process. We get to deal with what is happening in our home, those daily family dynamics, in an orderly and productive way, and have fun in the process. Family court helps our children learn through role play to use their voices, call out injustices, and not be afraid to speak up for what is right. And also not be afraid to admit when they're wrong, and do all the above in an organized and dutiful manner. I love it. Let's break it all down by first seeking what God says about it. Then we can talk about what our children will see in the culture, what they're going to see in those streets. Last but not least, I'll share our most recent family court session and the main takeaways from exercising family court in our home. All right, what does God say about this matter? 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 16 through 28. Solomon wisely judges. Then 2 women who were prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. The one woman said, "Pardon me, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth to a child while she was in the house. And it happened on the 3rd day after I gave birth that this woman also gave birth to a child, and we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, only the 2 of us in the house. Then this woman's son died in the night because she lay on him. So she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from beside me while your servant was asleep, and she laid him at her breast and laid her dead son at my breast. When I got up in the morning to nurse my son, behold, he was dead. When I examined him closely in the morning, behold, he was not my son, whom I had bore. Then the other woman said, No, for the living one is my son, and the dead one is your son. But the first woman said, No, for the dead one is your son, and the living one is my son. So they spoke before the king. The king said, No one says, This is my son who is living, and your son is a dead one. And the other says, No, for your son is a dead one, and my son is a living one. And the king said, Give me a sword. So they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, Cut the living child in 2, and give half to one and half to the other. But the woman whose child was the living one spoke to the king, for she was deeply stirred over her son. And she said, Pardon me, my lord, give her the child, and by no means kill him. But the other woman was saying, He shall be neither mine nor yours. Cut him. Then the king replied, "Give the first woman the living child, and by no means kill him. She is his mother." Then all Israel heard about the judgment which the king had handed down. They feared the king because they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. I love that. The wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. Our most recent family court session went like this. My oldest daughter, Autumn, was in charge for making sure all the chores got done in the time allotted. There are 4 girls. Autumn is the oldest. She's in charge. All of my girls know if you have an issue, you talk to your older sibling. So if the 5-year-old has an issue, you talk to the 6-year-old. If the 6-year-old has an issue, you talk to the younger of the twins. They're 9 years old. If the younger twin can't handle whatever is going on, you talk to the oldest, Autumn. She's in charge. If Autumn gets stumped, then she can take it to Big Brother if he's around. That is our chain of command in our family. By the time a disagreement or anything crazy reaches my ears, it would have gone through at least 4 to 5 sets of ears before it comes to my attention. If it comes to my attention, we're taking it to family court because now whatever is impeding chores getting done or whatever little disagreement hasn't been handled at the lowest level possible, if it reaches my ears, it would have gone through at least 4 to 5 sets of ears by the time it reaches my ears. That means that it wasn't handled at the 5-year-old level. It wasn't handled at the 6-year-old level. It wasn't handled at 2 9-year-old levels. And if my son is around, he's 21, it wasn't handled at that level. That means that whatever is going on hasn't been resolved, talked about, acknowledged, and worked out by the time it reaches my ears. We have an official problem. Now, whatever I'm doing, if I'm preparing a lesson, if I'm cooking dinner, or if I'm having much needed quiet mommy time, because I have to meet with the Lord on certain issues, on certain days. You know, I'm a person, I'm broken. I don't have it all together all the time. And as much as I would love to get up at 5 a.m. and spend 2 hours of quality time with the Lord, sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. So throughout the day, if I task my children to make sure you are doing what you're supposed to be doing, and if I sneak away to just spend a solid 15 minutes or 30 minutes to just get myself together, if I'm having one of those days, I need that time. And so if someone's knocking on my door and that time is interrupted because whatever is going on with my children has gone through my 5, 6, 9-year-olds. And if my son's around, if it has reached my ears, we have a problem. We're taking it to court. Autumn, the oldest of the 4 girls, tells her big brother that Afia is playing and she's not helping with the chores. And instead, she's choosing to play. Big brother investigates and tries to redirect Afia. You know, help her to get back on task. She throws a fit because she's my passionate little baby, right? That's just her. She starts crying and wailing. Big brother determines parental involvement is necessary. I hear the case from Micaiah, and I pick up my phone and I start texting her daddy. I reported to dad at work. I text him the following. Report. The family versus Afia Clark. Family court will convene at 8:15 p.m. Afia stands accused of not listening to the chain of command, playing instead of doing chores, and crying about it. That's the end of the text. Now, Micaiah sends his statement to dad in a separate text message, and dad confirms my text message that he received the notice. I inform the girls to be ready for family court at 8:15. Boom. Now we can officially carry on about our day. And let me tell you, when my children get put on notice, they know every single one of them better have their facts straight and chores done before daddy gets home. That notice gives them the time to decide to tell the truth, own up to what they are responsible for, and formulate how they're going to plead their case and so on. It's the anticipation that we're going to get to the bottom of things. We're going to get to the bottom of what the problem is, and that justice will be served one way or another. It also takes the pressure off of me as a mommy at home all day and allows me to stay focused on tending to the things at home and what the family requires of me as a wife and a mommy. All my kids stay on task for the rest of the day because they've already been put on notice. And they are busy watching the clock for 8:15 to roll around, and they're double checking everything, and I love it. And let me tell you, getting ready for family court is fun. I get to arrange the living room, the chairs, and we have a whole family box. It's our family court kit. It has a robe, a gavel, a prop, handcuffs, a costume for the jailer, and all that. We have all that. And we get to just have fun. When 8:15 rolls around, daddy gets home. The girls are already in the living room, seated and ready for family court to begin. The Honorable Judge Daddy sits in his chair and we begin. It's so much fun. I try not to break character because while the family sitting in the living room having family court is super fun, I have to also remember we're addressing actual violations of family and home rules. And that's no laughing matter. But the way we address them as a family, the way we spell out for them through the procession of family court is real. And we found a way that we can do that where it doesn't have to be punitive. Remember, they're all under the age of 10. It's not that serious. We can learn as a family. We get to address some of these family issues and, dare I say, have fun in the process. And we get to make these memories with them. In this particular case, I was the prosecution. Afia elected to serve as her own defense, and the other three girls gave their testimonies of what happened. Afia is so brilliant. Remember, she's 6 years old. And listen to this, y'all. All the girls testified against Afia. She's in the red chair. She's in the hot spot. And all the girls are pretty much saying what Afia was and wasn't doing. She was in her room. She wasn't doing her chores. She was choosing to play. And later on, she threw a fit. And she got called out by Big Brother. And here's my favorite part. This is what I love about family court. My little Afia, 6 years old, waited for all her sisters to basically drag her through the mud, run her over with the bus, just snitching left and right, saying she wasn't helping. She chose to play. She was whining. She didn't listen. And all of them, one at a time, told how Afia was not contributing, then crying when she got called out. Here's the plot twist. Towards the end of family court, when it was time to give final remarks, Afia sat up and said, "Yes, I was playing. Yes, I was not listening. Yes, I was whining. But my sisters were playing with me. This is the game we were playing. Here's how long we were playing all together." I about fell out of my chair, clutching my pearls and completely proud of this little girl. She spoke up for herself. She admitted she did the wrong thing. She called out how her sisters were participating with her in the foolishness. And she did it all with a straight face. I love family court. Oh my gosh, that memory will stay with me forever. My husband looked at those girls, and what little color was in their face instantly faded away. Y'all know my girls are mixed, right? They're a little melanin deficient, and that's what makes it so funny. They lost it. I love it. So in light of the new evidence, we went through it all over again. Called each girl back to the hot seat and back front and center in the living room, gave them the opportunity to acknowledge the part of their story that they purposely left out, and so on. At the end of about a total of 20 minutes, family court session was coming to an end, it was time for the Honorable Judge Daddy to give his ruling. In the case of the family versus Afia, Afia was found guilty. Her sentence was read out, and she accepted the consequences of her actions. It was not just Afia that got a ruling against her. Her sisters, everyone, the chain of command who aided and abetted in her disobedience received a ruling also. Everyone had to acknowledge what they did, why it was wrong, apologize, and give hugs. Then accept the consequences, aka their sentences, the consequences of their actions. Just so you know, even though Afia was found guilty, her sisters received a greater sentence than her. Hubby and I applauded Afia for speaking up for herself, holding her tongue until the end of family court, waiting for her sisters to omit the truth, to save their own butts, and most importantly, having the fortitude and the maturity to find the words at 6 years old, y'all, to admit where she missed the mark. She took accountability for her actions. She said, yes, I did that. And she listed all of everything that she was guilty of. Yes, she missed the mark, yet she still was bold to advocate for herself in front of the whole family. Well done, Afia. I couldn't wait to call my mom and tell my mom all about it. By contrast, allow me to highlight a few points of the case of the two harlots. Just like the woman whose son had died took the living son of the other woman living under the same roof as her, she was willing to let the living son die by the sword of the king so no one would have the living child. So too, the world is happy to see their own children perish and then come after your children. Make you think you don't know what you're doing with your children. That your children is safer in the hands of women who don't have children, never wanted them, and don't have any. Men who can care less if babies and children are raised right in the home, in their sphere of influence. Men and women who have sacrificed their own children on the altars of convenience. My body, my choice. Then turn around and have the audacity to tell you how to raise your own children. I get it all the time. Oh, you homeschool? Oh, those poor children, which they say out loud. How will they be socialized? Which is a dated question. A cliche question, if you ask me, and my response is always the same. Socialize to do what? Learn what the world is teaching our children? How to be weak-willed, simple-minded, followers of whatever the culture tells them to think? That's what the school systems are producing, by the way, mindless followers. That the rainbow is not God's promise to never again destroy an evil and perverse world by water because of our disobedience. No, the culture is teaching our children the rainbow is a symbol of pride, of hypersexuality. That's what socializing with the culture is producing in our children. That men can be women, women can rule in places of men, and the children are to stay in a child's place, to be seen like accessories and not heard. Children are the new accessory and not the future of our culture, the future of this generation, the legacy of our family. And I laugh when someone asks those questions about our school choice and how we're choosing to raise our children. Like, are we having a discussion or are we having an argument? Are you challenging me about my choice to stay at home and raise my children? Or are you a little triggered? What's happening right now? And I tell people we're not worried about our children because socialized or not, they're not being raised by a crooked and perverse generation. And them being socialized is the least of our worries. They're going to be socialized. Why? Because I'm out at the grocery store talking to people throughout the day when I'm doing my errands. because my children are watching how people interact, because we naturally get socialized when we're out and about and we're doing things as a family. We are not worried about our children being socialized by a crooked and perverse generation. We see it as protecting their little hearts and their little minds, not to be confused with sheltering, because they will have to face the culture and the world in the battle ahead in their generation in due season. The world will tell you, don't give up your career to stay at home all day and watch snotty-nosed children. After all, that is what the women of the world are doing. Give them the grandma, give them the grandpa, put them in daycare, anything to get your children out of you and away from you. They treat children like inconveniences, nuisances, and burdens to society. Women are pushing around dogs and strollers and walking children on leashes, people. Daycares have a year-long wait list, and dogs can now sit at the table at restaurants. But don't you dare bring a baby into a restaurant. That would be considered rude and inconsiderate to others. Older women with no children and seemingly great careers are teaching younger women, impressionable young ladies, they deserve the world. They deserve better. Don't ruin your body so young. I've heard this with my own ears. I've seen it with my own eyes. Older women will teach younger women. Older women, by that I mean like in their late 30s and 40s, sometimes 50s, but I've seen it like in their late 30s and 40s, teach 19-year-olds, 22-year-olds. Don't ruin your body so young. You have so much to live for. You know how many women are surgically altering their bodies in their 20s with no thought of carrying a child later in life? What it will do to their bodies, and how they're going to have to undo $5,000, sometimes $20,000 of work, body enhancements when they are ready to have children. They don't think about it. Women who get all sorts of work done to their bodies to look great for who? For who? Right? And then later on, when, their minds change a little bit and they do want a family, they forget they got all these enhancements in them, and they don't think about what their body has to go through to grow life inside of them. I've seen women mutilate their bodies and their faces in their 20s and 30s, yet were terrified, right, to ruin their bodies by carrying a baby. Sadly, a lot of those same women, married and single, murdered their babies to qualify to get their body alterations. They show up on the day of surgery and discover that they're pregnant. Surgeon says, go back and take care of it, and then we can get you back in surgery in a week. And they rush to go do that. I remember everyone telling me how stupid I was when I decided to step down from active duty service to commit to the time it takes to raise my family at home. I wanted to commit my time to work at home. My son needed me. He was in the 7th grade, and at that time in my career, he was in the public school system, and I could see the trajectory of his life, and it was not good. We were doing everything we needed to do at home, but I can see he needed me at that time full time. He needed me to come home. Something happens in middle school, y'all. And probably by the time our children get older, it's going to start happening in elementary school if it's not already. But they lose their minds. And then we were pregnant with the twins. We had our twins. The same year I decided to come home full time. I got off of active duty and I decided to come home. It was the same year I had my twin girls. I couldn't even tell you if I had chosen to re-enlist, that final re-enlistment that would carry me to retirement. I couldn't tell you if the following 2 girls would have been here if I didn't lay aside my career. Make the sacrifice on the altar of what God my creator was calling me to do. So instead of sacrificing my family and my future children, I decided to lay down my career. That is unheard of in our culture. You will be called stupid if you say that out loud to your boss. Who knows where my son would be as far as his character and his future, because again, the world was getting at him and I could just see it. Despite how hubby and I were raising him with the 6, maybe 7 hours a day we had with him at home, despite our efforts, Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 hours a day, the world had more quality time with him to influence him away from God, because that's what the culture is doing, away from a strong and godly character. No, the culture wants to keep your sons weak and mindless with no character, away from his purpose. You know, that thing that God put in him to do specifically in this generation with his life. The world doesn't want him to know that. And he was going deeper and deeper into confusion and pure foolishness. And I saw that, and I needed to come home. God was calling me home. Everyone called me stupid when I recognized it and chose to come home, get him out of that school system in Washington State. You know, the school board, of course, they scoffed at me and fought me when I decided to disenroll him from school to homeschool. And initially they said I was not qualified to teach my child at home, even though they knew nothing about me besides my name on a piece of paper. But I was committed to answering the call to come home and commit to turning that young man around, put the fear of God in his soul and some steel in his spine, find out where he had lost his mind and get that young man back on track. That was my mission. I had to do it. And it takes work, parents. And our children have to know we got their backs. And pun intended. We got their backs. And we're not afraid to go to dark places to snatch them out of whatever is holding them down, holding them back. And they have to know that we have their backs to put them at the forefront of our time and our energy, that we want to invest in them. And we're not afraid to engage. Our children have to understand and know that for themselves. Not one person applauded me for putting my child first. After sharing the same testimony I'm sharing with you, after sharing this same testimony with coworkers and my boss, every time they ask me, why are you getting out? Why are you throwing your career away? Why are you being so stupid? I said the same thing to them that I'm saying to you. And not that I need the approval of man, but it was a grim reminder that the world will not approve. They will not encourage you to put the things of God first. Those children belong to God. We belong to God. You are your child's steward until they become men and women capable of making their own decisions. Until they become adults, you are their steward. The world will demean and mock a woman for simply wanting to stay at home and safeguard their children, give them a safe place to learn and grow and just be kids. Our culture is a reflection. Our world is a reflection of what happened when King Solomon had to decide between the fate of 2 harlots. The first case brought before him was a case of 2 harlots. Follow me. Hello, follow this. The application is so layered, but don't miss the simplicity of God's word and its application for us in the 21st century. 2 harlots had 2 babies. One was dead and one was alive. Both women were fighting for the surviving child. One with evil motives to just take from the real mommy. Why? We can only imagine why a woman would want to take a baby that is not hers. How that baby would turn out based on what happened to her child. how that baby would turn out based on what that same woman did with her baby in the secrecy of night. She switched babies. How evil is this woman to handle her deceased baby the way that she did, and what she did to that other woman? Imagine if you were that other woman. The horror of waking up and learning that this woman who you live with, she was under your same roof. You live with this woman. What happened to her baby, it seemingly looks like an accident, but look what she did to her baby after she discovered her baby was dead. And look what she attempted to do with the other woman, to the other woman and with her child. Even after living through that horror, we have to recognize the other woman's faith. Remember, she was a harlot too, okay? Two harlots. It's easy to judge people because of their past or even their current lifestyle choices, but peep the wisdom of God in the scriptures. It's for us to learn from. They were both harlots before the king to be judged. This woman's faith, even after being plotted against, could have just saved herself. After all, you're in this lifestyle. Nothing is mentioned about the fathers of these babies. We're not told who or where they are. Your fellow harlot is plotting against you, and now you're in front of a king to be judged. You could lose your baby. More punishment could be put on you for a number of reasons, just because you're in front of a king being judged. What did this woman choose? She simply defaulted to what was right. Let the baby live. She didn't know what would become of her baby. She didn't even know if she would be a part of her baby's life or even what would happen to her own life. But what did she choose? She acted in faith. Let the baby live. In God's providence, through the wisdom of Solomon, justice was served by what? A sword. That's one of my favorite parts. 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 24. The king said, "Give me a sword." God has been using a sword since the Old Testament to separate good and evil, to distinguish between right and wrong, to separate those who belong to him and those who are not of him, who don't belong to him. I love it. A sword was given to King Solomon, even though he was not going to literally divide the living baby in two, but in his wisdom, the wisdom that God gave Solomon, he used a sword to test who was the true mommy. Let me tell you, a mother will do anything for her children. She will not sacrifice her baby and the future of her children to save herself. Women have this spirit about them to preserve the fruit of the womb. We protect children by any means necessary, even if it means we have to give up our own life. What we want to do, our desires for our life, in order for our children to have a future and a hope. Why? Because God put that spirit in us. That's how we were created. And we should really question the root of all things that are contrary to God's design and purpose for women and mommies. You may not have physically harmed a child, but are you misleading or pushing the children that God put in your life, giving you stewardship over, away? And by extension, all the children in your sphere of influence, are you pushing them away from knowing God, from knowing God created them, what God created them to do in their generation? Or have you given up and sacrificed them to the streets? Matthew 18:6, but whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for him to have a heavy millstone hung around his neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. There are 3 points hubby and I want to share with parents as we wrap up this episode. 3 points. Number 1, ask God for the wisdom to raise your children in righteousness. Number 2, have your child's back. Put some steel in their spines. Number 3, raise your arrows and be ready to release them when it's time. Okay, number 1, ask God for the wisdom to raise your children in righteousness. The family is the smallest form of government. It just makes sense to see it exactly as such. You have governorship over your family, and we have to govern our children accordingly. Stay in your word. They don't know what is just or right if we don't show them, point it out, even in the small things like lying to one another, being lazy, making your sister do all the work, not standing up for injustices, especially violations against the family, against themselves, against the people around them. You know, the things that they're just not going to know what's right and what's wrong. We have to spell it out for them. And as adults, we may think that it's a no-brainer, but remember, if you have a 5-year-old, they've been on this earth for 5 years. What do they know? You can't assume anything. You have to teach them. You can't teach and train if you're not in your word and you have no standard to base how you're going to teach and train your own kids at home. Solomon was not able to deliver sound judgment if he were not in tune with his creator and the will for his life as the anointed king of Israel. And we see in scripture when we stray, as Solomon did later in his reign, and when we stray from God's standard and his will for our life, we see what it cost us. It cost Solomon his legacy. His legacy suffered because he strayed to foreign gods, lowercase g. Number 2, have your children's back. Put some steel in your child's spine, in their character, and train them up, parents. Make sure your children know you have their backs, that you are not afraid to back them up when they're in the right and call it out when they're in the wrong. There is an accountability aspect to our family court. It's our way of addressing the quirks about their character, the sin that's in them, and do it in such a way where it's not this overarching tone of punitive and, just laying the law down so hard on them and they're 10 years old and under. But we also get to address what's coming out their mouths, their actions and their behavior and the character that they're developing. So we're still addressing it, but our children have to know we're going to be there for them regardless. But they have to know your parents, the parents that have been assigned to you, buddy, one day we're going to have to give an account for our own actions and how we led others. So we don't just have their backs because they're our children. When they behave badly, make poor decisions, and choose the opposite of what we're teaching them, we can't stand for that. We won't stand for that. Our children have to understand the world does not revolve around them and their poor behavior. Sometimes they just want to behave badly to suck up the energy from mom and dad and siblings for themselves. And that's a solid no for us. Like, I love you, son, but that thing that you're doing right there, we can't stand for that. Turn away from it. Similarly, these girls, our daughters, we're teaching them to stay away from wolves and don't cry wolf. Like, I love you, daughter, but you cannot play with wolves, then cry when you get bit. Life doesn't work that way. Crows fly with crows. Wolves roll with wolves. You're either a child of God or a child of the world. Light has nothing in common with darkness. Number 3, last but not least, raise your arrows. When it's time, parents, release them. They are arrows. Moms, your children are not your security blanket. They're your arrows to be released one day. They are designed to be released on purpose. Behold, children are a gift of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. How blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be ashamed when they speak with their enemies in the gates. Psalm 127:4. When it's time to release them, let them go. With the knowledge you have done your due diligence to teach and train them. If you don't have that sense of security, parents, then you have some explaining to do. And then you have some work to do. Go do it. Release them out in the world to proclaim what they know to be true according to what you put in them. Release them to be a witness with their life by what they profess to believe, what comes out their mouths, and allow God to use them to point others back to Jesus. That's ultimately what it's all about. what we were put on this earth to do in our generation. And that's what they are going to do in their generation. Not merely to live a life doing what they want to do, but to point the way back to God, our Creator, for others. When our children know that we are proud of them, when they know we've done all that we could do to prepare them, and you have all the confidence in them as they are released from your home, it emboldens them to continue that legacy and teach their children. They're going to know the importance of passing on that type of legacy. Go and listen to episode 22 of ACV Family Talk podcast on generational curses. Our children will remember family court and the subsequent conversations at the dinner table. How mommy and daddy executed discipline and justice, training in righteousness throughout their upbringing, and still loved on them and had fun in the process. It's possible, parents. I would not say it if it were not true in my own life. They're going to remember, because our children remember so much more than what we give them credit for. How mommy and daddy were intentional to teach from places where they missed the mark in their own life, not from a position of shame, but urgency not to repeat our folly. They're going to take the collective of all those memories, and our children will know there is no other way to go and no other way to lead their own families one day. How they have a template to do something good in their family, with their marriage, built upon what we've been striving and praying for all their lives. And prayerfully, they get to continue that legacy with my grandbabies and future generations of our family. If you come from a family where that template, God's standard, was never modeled for you, no one ever taught you or led the way for you, all you knew is fussing and cussing and don't have the tools to even know where to begin, it's okay, parents, because our hope is not in the righteousness of man, but in the hope of Jesus Christ. It is Christ alone. He is our living template, y'all. And last I checked, his word is alive and timeless. It's still available to you in your generation, wherever you are in the season of life that you find yourself. It doesn't matter if you're hearing about all this and learning it for the first time, or maybe you knew the right thing to do, but you still missed the mark and didn't do it. That's okay. It's never too late to confess it before God. Seek him while he still may be found. Ask for grace and restoration in the areas of your life and your family that are hurting. But remember the story of the wise king in 1 Kings 3:16. Here's an easy way to remember it. 1 Kings 3:16 in the Old Testament and John 3:16 in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, 1 Kings 3:16, two women, they were both harlots. They both played the harlot, right? They came to the king and stood before him to be judged. One woman whose baby was dead tried to take the son of the other woman. In the New Testament, John 3:16, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, so that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life.
Thanks for tuning in to the Clark Family Homeschool. It's that kind of close. See you next week. Bye.